they decided to change it and put your hand over your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And as you probably know, the whole piece of under God was added in the 50s during the Cold War to distinguish the United States from the godless communists out there. But in his original pledge that he wrote, it was to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty, justice, and freedom for all, or something to that effect. And he took that out because during that time, when he wrote it, there was definitely Jim Crow in the South of the United States. And he knew that that was not the case for Black Americans. So he had to change it with liberty and justice for all. And again, that a Christian socialist is a commie in his own right, you know, that part with the under God part was put in. And then the whole singing of the national anthem or My Country 'Tis of Thee that came after that. But if you were brought up here and indoctrinated and saying that since a little child and you recite these words, but you're reciting them and you're not really aware of what you're saying. It's just like you're singing a song. You know, you're constantly singing the song. It's in the back of your head. Sometimes I'll ask students, what is it exactly saying? I remember a kid said when she tried to not do the pledge but sing the national anthem, and you know, where it starts with, oh, say, can you see? She said, Jose, can you see? So, I mean, the indoctrination is just really, really deep. I mean, but it's part of the socialization that we get in this country, which is part of, you know, our government wants to socialize us to be patriotic. Some schools have this is on the loudspeaker every day. Please stand for the pledge, you know, and right after that, and now for the announcements. I mean, so for me, that, you know, it comes right after that. And some people will yell at their students and force them to get up. And I had an incident in my class where I had a student who refused to do this. This was one of the smartest kids I ever had. And at the end of the pledge, and, you know, that's first when I was teaching honors, and I had asked them, you know, why do we do this? You know, because it was a government class, my first civics class. So why are we getting up and doing this? Let's talk about the history of this. And at the end of the pledge, he says, I refuse to get up and do that. And at the end of the pledge, when some stood up, almost all of them did. And he didn't. Robert refused to stand up. And he would say at the end, blah, 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 to the republic, which said, one nation under indivisible with liberty and justice for white men only. He said it every time. So one time, my assistant principal was in the room, and Robert and this kid, Ali, he was Palestinian, refused to get up. And she screamed, get up for the pledge! Ali jumped up. Get up for the pledge! Robert says, I refuse to get up for the pledge. Go to my office! Screamed at him. And Miss Lloyd, here's my homework. And went into the next room. My class was looking. I loved this kid. I really loved this kid. I had this kid in the 10th grade. So I knew him. He was really close to me. And so everybody's like, Miss Lloyd, you did this to him. I'm like, this kid was already there before I even met this kid. You know, he was already way to the left before he met me. So he's, you know, and then they started holding up signs, free Robert. And, you know, we'd already had this discussion. So 10 minutes later, assistant principal opens the door and he walks into the room. She closes the door. The class erupts. Yay! And then they start screaming. And then she opens the door. What's going on in here? This is an honors class. You're not supposed to be. Blah. I said, we've had this discussion about the pledge. We all know how Robert feels. Blah, blah, blah. And Robert probably said, listen, ma'am, I will call the ACLU on you. I don't have to get up and say the pledge. If you'd like, I'll call my lawyer. So, you know, the forced patriotism. And this went all over the school. And everybody's like, oh, only this was going to happen in your room. This kid came out to be like number 18 in the class. You know, he's probably... this is a Jewish kid who refused to get up. So, you know, I mean, if you look at different ways a pledge is written. I'm just looking at this article here, Disgrace on Campus, where a professor requires a student to pledge allegiance to a racist, sexist, and homophobic America. So this guy did another bent on the pledge. Let me read this really quick. And he told his school students in Colorado at Denver University, actually where that student ended up going, I pledge allegiance to and wrap myself up in the flag of the United States against anything un-American, and to the Republicans for which it stands.
And to the
Republicans, which it stands, two nations, under Jesus, rich against poor, with curtailed liberty and justice for all, except blacks, homosexual, women who want abortions, communists, welfare queens, tree huggers, feminazis, illegal immigrants, children of illegal immigrants, and if you don't watch it, you.
What is that allegiance to?
This is what he put this pledge, this on, and then he told his students at the university to stand up and read this, the new pledge he wrote. And of course, this is all an article on Fox, which I guess made an attempt to crucify the man for coming out. But there are different takes on the
professor.
pledge.
What was the
Dr. Charles Angeletti required his students to recite a pledge that mocks Republicans and accuses America of targeting blacks and communists. A tenured professor at Metropolitan State University, MSU, in Denver required students to pledge their allegiance to a racist, sexist, homophobic America that targets blacks and women who want abortions in the name of Jesus. Dr. Charles Angeletti, a self-proclaimed atheist and socialist professor of American civilization at the publicly funded Denver University, required students to recite the satirical Pledge of Allegiance during the fall 2014 semester, according to a class flyer obtained by Campus Reform. The flyer was distributed to the entire class, and students were required to recite it, according to Stephen Farr, a freshman majoring in meteorology. According to Farr, Professor Angeletti's course offered no alternative political perspective and aggressively repressed debate among classmates.
So
Farr noted that fellow students were suspicious of the professor's motives, but few had the courage to openly protest the
So let me ask you a question.
Pledge.
With regards to all the police associations that are against these guys who are standing up, did they take out the justice for all in the Pledge of Allegiance? In that you shouldn't be wearing those T-shirts. You shouldn't be wearing I Can't Breathe T-shirts. You shouldn't be wearing Justice for Tamar Rice. You shouldn't be wearing those. What about justice for all?
Well, you liberty in reality, what liberty is freedom from government oppression, and justice, the uneven or the even-handedness of the law. So yes, those are the things that we should be aspiring for. But to say the pledge as if it exists like that, rather than a wish, but as an affirmation, that's two different things. You have to make up your mind on how you see that. Is there liberty and justice for all, or is this a wish that we have?
It's a wish.
It's a wish.
It's a wish.
I had a colleague say, this is the Christmas spirit. We should all be here, peace, will, and goodwill to all men. And I said yes, and we should also hope for liberty and justice for all. That's the banner we can unite under.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I got a little history tonight on the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you.
I gotta.
Listen. You got a civics teacher here for a reason, Anselm.
I tell you, let's listen to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. What do they mean by one nation under God?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, it can mean a number of things. It can mean one nation as all of us are united in a nationalist fervor, or it can mean
God is our supreme being or something.
One nation
under God. Yeah. We are all in that nation.
Yes. I can see it if you put the one nation under God. There's three ways I see that. As as a civics person, I see it, well, because we live in a federal government, you have 50 states, but they're under one national government. That's how one way to look at it. To say one nation under God, that means that this is God's country because God lives in the United States.
It has to do with religion. It has to do with religion.
And then again, the under God issue, as I said to you, was put in during the 50s, during the Cold War, to distinguish us from the communists, because communists don't.
What do you mean by indivisible?
The indivisibility, for example, you have the North and the South, right? So you have these 50 states that cannot be divided, even though each state, this is the concept of federalism.
It cannot be divided?
You have each state, but you have one national government over all of the states that's supreme.
Okay.
So that's the indivisibility.
With liberty?
But it could be also, can't be divided.
What's the liberty?
Liberty is freedom from government oppression.
And the last one, but do we have any liberty and justice for all? Are they serious?
Well, I mean, your liberties are outlined in the amendments that had to be put in after the Constitution was signed 20 years later, 10 years later.
Well, let me just give the Soma quote of the day before we go.
Yes, time check is 9:40.
Time check.
And it's the last day, and it's a break, and I won't see you for a while. And I'm excited.
So here is oh my God, listen to this. This is Marvin from Trinidad now. He's
Hi,
a very
Marvin.
intelligent guy now.
Yes, I would hope so.
He said, Anselm, things have changed. I think it's necessary because it helps the young child accept themselves
Which is necessary.
if they have a darker hue, especially in the Caribbean where value is placed on light skin. Also, Anselm, things have changed in both the primary and secondary school curriculum. High emphasis is placed on Caribbean history from an Afrocentric view, you see?
Thank you.
Yep. Especially in Caribbean studies, they completely deconstruct the misleading recorded history by Europeans. Come on, Anselm, I'm answering the question to what the co-host is asking.
Thank you. Because Anselm doesn't know because he's been distanced.
The Indians were brought into the Caribbean to fill the labor shortage after the
right.
abolition of slavery. After the abolition of African enslavement, there was a mass exodus of the plantations. Remember, the plantation became a total institution based on race and wealth profit maximization. Spain actually had the most lucrative ownership in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
The British gold, however, was in the form of sugarcane. The Portuguese were the founders of sugarcane. Okay, I'll end now. Enough Caribbean history. Laughed out loud. Is he a bright kid or what?
He just knows the history that you don't know, and he pretty much just reiterated most of what I told you.
But this is like a 19-year-old kid from
Because you know why?
From one of the poorest areas in Trinidad and Tobago.
But that doesn't matter because the curriculum has been reconstructed, and you're back in the 1960s curriculum because you still
70s.
You're the same age as I am. So you had a 60s, early 70s curriculum. And that, I guess you were still using the same textbooks that the British had left you and nothing had been reconstructed by then. Mm. But I would hope that it would have more of an Afrocentric bent because you had a lot of intelligence coming out of it.
So that's good to you. But you see, I didn't know and I didn't try to answer it. I didn't try to give you misinformation like if I know I knew it all. But I knew I had my good friend Marvin listening, and he would, give us. Thank you,
Marvin, for reconfirming. Marvin, I don't think Anselm would have believed me if you didn't give him some information.
So he's keenly listening. So just before we go, let's give you the Soma quote there. Because, by the way, Marjorie's not going to be back until, when are you going to be back, Marjorie?
Whatever. The day after New Year's. What day is New Year's? On a Thursday, a Wednesday?
I'm not sure.
Today's
the 23rd.
Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And then tomorrow's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Which is Wednesday. So New Year's is on Thursday. New Year's Day is Thursday. If I'm alive, I'll come back Friday. I mean, not dead tired. And I don't think I'll die over this break, though.
So here's a quote by Abraham Lincoln. In the end, it's not the years in your life that counts. It's the life in your years. I'm not going to read what he means. It doesn't matter how long you live, but how much you live. During that time, you were here. So many of us get caught up with age and aging and forget it's not about turning back the clock or staying young forever, but trying to get the best feeling that you can out of each moment of your life. Abraham Lincoln was known for being handy with words, so it's no surprise that he was able to make a quote like this, especially since he was able to pack a lot of life in his 56 years. In the end, it's not the years in your life that counts, it's the life in your years. And there you have it, the Sumo quote of the day. Time check.